Everything we covered last week, how to create XML and JSON files, how to use Ajax to display that XML and JSON data in your web page, we are going to be applying to APIs. And what you're going to be doing this week is you're going to be finding an API. Most of them do require keys, which are typically free for developers. So you are going to have to find an API, register, and request a key. Now, I have found that when I've requested keys, sometimes when I use my edu address, I never receive the key. And when I use my other Gmail, I do receive the key. So I would try your edu first, and then if you don't have any luck getting the key, then use a different email. Because you have to have that key. It needs to be part of the request that you send the API. And then once you send a request to the API, it's going to process your request, and it's going to send you a response. And the response is typically a JSON file, although it could also be an XML file. And so far, we have used an API because we've been using Google Fonts for a couple semesters, and that is considered an API. The DOM and jQuery are also considered to be APIs. So you have already used them. There are, gosh, hundreds. Almost every single corporation has a developer interface with an API that you can access and retrieve information from. So, I mean, Amazon, Facebook, Instagram, all of them have APIs. And most of these are considered RESTful APIs, representational state transfers. So at the point in time that you make the request, they are sending you the information. And basically, in order to use an API, you do need to read through the documentation at the developer site, because you have to know what the API does, you have to know how to ask for the data, and you also need to know what it returns. And if you don't know those three things, you're not going to be able to use the API, or you won't be able to effectively use it without getting errors. And as I mentioned, the API's developer website should give you an overview of what the API does. Some of them have really good documentation, and some of them do not. Because you guys are beginning at this, I would choose the ones with the better documentation, and I do have examples of developer sites that honestly were pretty easy to set up. They have pretty much full-blown examples that you can copy and paste, and then it's just a matter of modifying some of the parameters. So the way you would ask for information is you have to give it the API's URL, and then following the URL, you typically give it some kind of parameter. So if you were trying to access a temperature, you may give it the name of the city, or you may have to give it the latitude and the longitude. It just depends on how the API is set up. Okay, so typical parameters might be date ranges, locational searches, what kind of response format you want, how many results you want returned. Those are all considered to be parameters. And as I mentioned earlier, the results are going to be a JSON file or a XML, and I'm finding more and more JSON and fewer XML files. When you send the request, you're going to indicate if you're using POST or GET. Most of the ones, I think all of the examples that I've got here use GET. Again, at the website, they will tell you which one to use because they should have examples of the URL in the script tag. So all these URLs are right in a script tag. So I have a couple examples here. The Marvel comic site was kind of fun. And they have a developer portal. And you do need to kind of join. It's free. And you do have to request a key in order to use this. Okay, and then, so of course I went through all the steps, requested a key, and I did a very simple one. So I decided to just let you see all of the characters. So it starts at the beginning of the alphabet. And right now it's showing me 0 through 20. And if I click on next, you can see, and this information that I'm displaying comes directly from Marvel's site. In order to do a lot of the API requests, you have to have an ID. So when I set this up, I thought, well, if I display the IDs, then you guys can use this to figure out what the IDs are, and then you can go ahead and do a different kind of call if you wanted. And if you want to see my code, all you have to do is right click on the page, and I've got the code right in here. And you can see it's just a very, very simple CSS in here. I did Flexbox. And I've got all of the information set up to display inside the article tag. And then I get into my script. And because it's retrieving JSON, I use JavaScript. And so you can see the display area, which is right here. I kind of blank that out. Got a little text string I blank out. The counter display, that is for this. So you can tell which ones you're looking at. And there's literally hundreds of these. So increases by 20 each time. As you can see, it's going to tell you what ones you're looking at. The reason it increases by 20 each time is because I am increasing it by 20. Could I have chosen a different number? Yes. Okay. But this is just how I decided to do it. And you can see that I am updating the count display, which is this, with my new character count. So it does the initial character count, which starts at 0. So it's got 0, 2, I add 20 to it, add that onto the end, so it says 0 to 20. Okay, now the character count is 20. So when it comes through here again, it's going to say 22. Well, we add 20 to it. Now it's adding on 40, so it's going to say 20 to 40. Okay, so this little section here is how I'm getting the text updated in that little input box. Let's see, and here is actually where that is updating. And let's see. So here is something I'm calling offset. This is a parameter that Marvel is expecting. So I've got a variable called offset, and I've got offset equals. I'm adding in my character count. And you can see that variable goes right here in the URL. So the URL has got their address. Okay, and all of this information is at the developer site. Okay, and then the parameters that you can use are there's lots of different options. I chose offset. Do you have to choose offset? No, you could choose ID if you wanted. Okay, so I chose offset, and then you can see I've got the key. So that is my URL, and then I'm using getJSON. I am passing it the URL, and you can see here that I've got an anonymous function, and I'm pulling in the response. This is the response from the API. So I am sending them my URL, which is this long thing. It's sending back a response. I am calling it response. I do log the response to the console. Normally I would remove that after I had it working, but I left it in because then you guys can come here and press F12. And you can see what this data looks like, okay, when it retrieves it. Okay, so this represents 20. Okay, so you can kind of see what that JSON data looks like as it's being retrieved. And this is kind of important if you want to access and display the data. You have to know what it looks like. Okay, so I kept that in there so you could all see it. And then I am looking at the length of the response. So I've got response.data.results.length. Okay, so if that is equal to 0, which it never should be, basically until I get to the end, right? So if I keep clicking next, eventually I'm going to get to the end, but I haven't reached it yet. So anyway, so that really shouldn't happen, but if it does, I'm going to display a little error message. Otherwise, I'm going to process the data that is in the response. Okay, and so I get into a little for loop here, response.data.results.length, and I'm going to stay in here as long as x is less than the length. Okay, so if we kind of look in here, I've got response, right? Dot data, that's referring to this. Dot results, that's referring to this. Okay, so the length of my results is going to be 20. So response is what I'm calling what's coming back from Marvel, okay? And then I've got dot data, dot results, dot length. And this is what I'm referring to, data results. And obviously the length of the array you can see is 20. Okay, and then I'm adding to the text string. So response.data.results, I'm subscripting in. Okay, so again, response is what I got from the API, .data, .results. This is the array. I'm subscripting into the array. And then I'm accessing name, which is what I wanted to show. You'll also notice that I access description. And you can see that. So I've got name, I've got the ID, and I've got the description. Those are the pieces of information that I'm accessing. Then I'm checking to see if there is a thumbnail. Okay, and so to check the thumbnail, I'm using response.data.results.thumbnail.path. So let us take a look here. So here's our dot thumbnail. And if I click on that, okay, here is the path. All right, so let's look at this one. And here's the path. Not all of them have images, okay? So if there is something there, then I'm setting up an image tag. So I've got begin graphic, so that's the start of my image tag. End graphic, I add in the alt and a style so that they're all the same width. And I let the height vary, but I wanted the width to be the same. And let's see. And then I add in a paragraph. I've got the begin graphic. Then I'm adding in response data results thumbnail path. That is how I'm grabbing the image, because you can see I've got source equal here. So this response data results thumbnail path, if we go back and look, is the web address for my graphic. Okay, then I'm adding in a dot, then I'm adding in the extension, okay, which it does show you up here. And then I'm adding in the end graphic, which, let's see, I've got my beginning graphic and my end graphic right here, which is the alt text and all that fun stuff. And so this is formatting that entire paragraph. So that's how I'm getting the graphic in there. And that is why it's really important that you write to the council. Otherwise, it would be almost impossible to know how to do all of this. Okay, so we've got data. Inside data, we got results. Okay, inside results, I was looking at thumbnail and extension or thumbnail and path. Okay, and results is an array, so you got a subscript in. So there's actually a lot going on here, but not a lot of code. So once I have processed all of these, okay, all 20 of them, then I am updating the display. Okay, so that is the Marvel API, and there's a lot of different ways you can do this. If you like the Marvel stuff, one other option is to just give them an ID, okay, and then they'll retrieve the one character. And you can see that I did not retrieve all of the information about the characters. Like I didn't do anything with series or comics. I kind of picked and choose what I wanted to display. Get requests, and I should take a look at this. Get requests always have a question mark after them, and I'm pretty sure all of these are get requests. So here's my URL. There's the question mark. Here's my API key. And then you can see I used Ajax for this one. And again, I'm using the console log. I pretty much do that so you guys can press F12 and kind of take a look and see how it is returning the data. Because that allows you to kind of follow what I'm doing in here a little bit better. Okay, so as you can see, this is set up a little bit different. This is using jQuery, okay, but it's still processing the API data. And it does not matter to me if you guys use jQuery or JavaScript for this. Okay, so you can use whichever one you prefer, or if you actually go to the website and they have examples, you can copy and paste what they have and tweak it. That is okay too. Okay, so it's basically whatever you prefer. Let's see. Post requests are not part of the URL, obviously, because they are hidden. They're part of the HTTP request. And we don't really deal with post requests, but there are a couple of websites where you can access programs that will put together those requests. But again, that's not what we're doing. We're pretty much focusing on the GET requests. A couple additional ones that are pretty easy to use. The Open Weather Map API. This one was fairly simple to use. If it loads, but that link brings you to the website. And I put together a little live example, and this is all of the code that I use. So it's not a whole lot of code. Probably the most difficult thing I had to do was they use Kelvin temps, and I had to convert Kelvin to Fahrenheit. Which was a matter of Googling the formula and putting the formula into the code. So it's not super hard to do. Also with this, they are expecting a zip code. So I set a default zip code of Traverse City. So if they don't fill anything in, they do get Traverse City's temperature. And then if they fill something in, let me think of a zip I know in a different state. If they fill something in, okay, this is in Minnesota, then you can see whatever they filled in, and it's displaying the city, the temperature, what the weather is, a little graphic, and the wind speed. And the entire code for this is right here. And you'll notice zip code is what we're using as a parameter. And I have a little event listener, so when they click the button, we go through an anonymous function. And basically we're checking to see if the zip code was filled in, because remember I said you have to have a zip code. So if it's not filled in, then I set a default of Traverse City. Otherwise I'm grabbing the zip code, excuse me, the zip code they filled in, and I'm using that one. And then here is my URL. There's a question mark, so this is a get. And you can see that I've got the zip code, and then I've got my key. And this is a little anonymous function. So this is going to process after the open weather map processes the zip and sends back the results. Okay, and again, I did log. So you can press F12 and you can see what all of this looks like. And you can actually access any of this. If you wanted sunrise and sunset information, you can access all of this. The temp, you can see, looks really strange, and that is because it is in Kelvin. Okay, so that is one thing I had to account for. So you can see that I access the temp response. That's what I got back, .main.temp. Okay, so if I look here, here's main, here's temp. Okay, so I'm accessing that. And then I run it through the formula to convert it. And again, I do use round to get rid of the decimals, and I store it. And then you can see I'm just accessing the data, and the response.name, you can see I put inside heading 2 and response.name. So response is the object I'm getting from the API. So in here, what I'm accessing is name, and it's displaying Wyzetta. Okay. And then I've got the current temperature. That's where I'm going to show my converted temp, because honestly, no one understands Kelvin. So Fahrenheit people get, Celsius they get, Kelvin no. And then you can see I've subscripted into weather and got the description. So if we look in here, here's weather. Okay, and I subscript in with the 0. It's an array of 1. Okay, so there could be more than 1. Okay, but I'm just grabbing the very first thing. Okay, so I'm subscripting in with the 0, grabbing description. So you can see we've got response.weather sub0.description. This is how I get the icon. And then I'm also showing the wind speed. So this is actually a pretty simple little app for weather. And again, this one did require a key. Google Charts is the only one that does not require a key. If you don't want to sign up and you want to use Google Charts, that is fine. Google Charts is pretty simple to use. At the bottom, I did include a link to Tutorial Point. And they actually go through how to create all sorts of different types of charts. Okay, and then I'm giving you an example of a couple different chart types. Okay, so I did a 3D pie. I also did a column chart. And as you could see at tutorial's point, I mean, there are lots of other kinds of charts you can create. Okay, and so I did show you the code that I used. So basically what you have to do here, up in the head section of your code, you want to put this script tag because that gives you access to Google Charts, and you also need to load Google Charts into your program. So this code also needs to go up in the head section. So I put this one in, and then below it, I would put this one. In the body section where you want the chart to display, you're going to put a little div, which is going to be like a container for your chart. And you can give it whatever dimensions you want. Okay, and this is where your chart is going to go. And I just gave it an ID of container. Then in the body of the page, you're going to create a little script. And I have a function that I'm calling draw chart. This is for the 2-column chart. And so here is an array to table. And you can see that I've got year, protein, and carbs. And so then corresponding to that, those are like headings. And then I've got the year, the grams of protein, and the carbs. Okay, so all that information is in there. Then in the same function, and you guys can do whatever you want. Okay, so you can change all of this information and customize it for whatever you want to use. Okay, and if we look here, you can see year ends up being your category X labels. So this is positional. So this is your category X. Okay, then whatever you put next is going to be a series that you graph. Okay, so this is going to be the protein that gets graphed, and then this is also a series that you graph. And if you wanted additional bars, then you just create additional headings and put the corresponding numbers in. So if you want to generate a bar, you have to be using numbers and not text. Okay, so years, these are text, okay, and these were the category X. But what I'm actually using for the bars are numbers, okay, because if you try to put text in there, you can't generate a bar. It has to be a number. Then I've got a variable called options, and that's where I'm specifying the title. Okay, and at this point, I've told it what my category X is. I've told it what my bars are going to be. I've also told it the title. Okay, and so at this point, I can connect the chart that I've specified with the container, and I can have it draw. Okay, so here I've got chart equals, I'm telling him I want a column chart. I'm connecting it with the container, and then I'm taking this chart object and I'm drawing it. I'm using this data and these options. Okay, and then once the chart has been drawn, it displays it on the page. And you'll notice that all of the charts are fairly similar as far as how you have to set them up. So this is another chart, and these are different file formats that are being used on the web. And so again, if you look at this is the entire code, if this was in a separate page. And so you can see that I've got the loader JS that I'm loading up. I've got the Google Charts load here. And then I've got my container, which I had to name a little bit differently because I have two charts on the same page. Then I am defining my data. And you can see that I'm using add column. And for a pie chart, you basically have a column of string, and those become your labels, and you would have a column for numbers. Okay, and the numbers are used to generate the wedges in your chart. And so here I'm telling it what those columns are. And then here is the actual data. So the text is going to be my data labels, and the numbers are being used to generate the wedges of the pie chart. For options, I am giving it a title, and I'm also specifying a width and height and telling it it is 3D. Okay, and so then I create my little chart object. I'm saying, yep, this is a pie chart. I'm telling it where I want it in my page. And then I am using that chart object to actually draw the pie chart. And I'm pulling in my data that I specified along with my options. And this is what it looks like. And as I mentioned, Tutorials Point actually walks you through how to do all of the different types of charts. So in your assignment, you are going to have to do an API, okay, display data from an API. And if you are not comfortable signing up and registering, by all means, you can use Google Charts. Otherwise, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of them. So I think some of the like Flickr and Instagram, if you're into photography, you may find those fun to play around with. But if you find that it's taking you a really long time, then I would suggest going back and just doing one of the Google Charts.